Hello everyone, welcome everyone to the channel's Strange Night Podcast. Story 1. The Sleeping Woman Beneath the Black Lake. We begin this harrowing journey in the state of Maine, where the rugged beauty of nature often conceals sinister secrets. This is the story of Hexagon Lake, a simple-sounding name that harbors a chilling, frozen horror. Hexagon Lake is famous not for its beauty, but for its strange anomaly. The water is always pitch black, even under the brightest sun, and utterly devoid of life. No fish or aquatic plants can survive in its depths. Local legend tells that in the 19th century, a sorcerer named Eldrin fell deeply in love with a young woman named Seraphina, who was known for her clear voice and brilliant, sun-like blonde hair. Seraphina rejected Eldrin due to his darkness and strange rituals. Rejected, Eldrin performed an ancient voodoo ritual, not to kill Seraphina, but to imprison her. He believed that if he could not have her heart, he would capture her beauty and vitality forever. Eldrin enchanted her and submerged her beneath the waters of Hexagon Lake. Seraphina did not die. Her soul became trapped in the frigid depths, and that is why the lake water turned black. Seraphina's soul drained the light and life from the surface, turning it into a black mirror reflecting endless despair. For decades, Hexagon Lake was shunned by locals. But in recent years, with the boom of adventure tourism, daring campers began setting up tents near the shore, and they started hearing sounds. On moonless nights, when the air was cold enough to hear one's own heartbeat, campers swore they heard a faint, melancholic lullaby rising from deep beneath the black water. It was Seraphina's voice. The singing did not immediately inspire fear. It was sweet, mournful, and held an irresistible invitation. Those who heard it felt a strange compulsion, a craving to sleep. A group of college students camped there in 2018. They successfully recorded the audio. When they played it back, the lullaby seemed to transmit directly into the listener's head, causing a sense of dizziness and sleepiness. The next morning, one of the students, Mark, was gone. His tent was still pitched, his sleeping bag was there, but Mark was not. His footprints ended right at the water's edge. Police concluded he must have slipped and drowned, but Mark's friends recounted something far more terrifying. Mark had been sleepwalking the night before. He spoke of a beautiful woman who needed him to protect her from the darkness. The truth about Seraphina is more terrible than a simple love curse. Her soul is imprisoned, but to maintain her beauty and eternal vitality, she requires something called spiritual heat. Those lured by the lullaby into the lake do not drown. They are transformed by Seraphina into guardians at the bottom of the lake. Their souls are trapped, forming a protective layer around Seraphina, sustaining her warmth and consciousness with their very despair and will to survive. The lullaby is Seraphina's invitation, a call to oblivion. She doesn't just want solitude, she wants solitude shared, where each new trapped soul adds to the radiance of her cursed beauty. Today, if you stand by Hexagon Lake late at night, you might feel a cold pull from the water. And if you hear the lullaby, never let it lull you to sleep. For once you close your eyes, you will be pulled down eternally, becoming one more icy wall protecting the sleeping woman beneath the black lake, a beauty sustained at the cost of countless souls imprisoned beneath the black water, where light and life are eternally denied. Story 2. The Eternal Flame on the Death Tracks. We leave the black waters of Maine for the dry, scorched solitude of Texas. Across the vast plains, there is an old, abandoned stretch of railway where no train has passed for over a century. Locals call it the Death Tracks. This railway was the site of a terrible tragedy in 1910. A train carrying passengers and cargo, including a large quantity of sulfur, derailed during a storm. The sulfur immediately ignited and burned fiercely. The fire not only consumed the train cars and passengers, but also smoldered beneath the ground for weeks, turning the area into a massive funeral pyre. Strangely, after the fire died down, no remains of the bodies were found. Everything had been vaporized into ash by the extreme heat, as if hundreds of people had melted into the air. But the story did not end there. Annually, on the exact anniversary night of the accident, a ghostly phenomenon occurs. A small, weak flame with an unusual green color appears on the tracks. This flame never grows larger than the size of a candle, and it produces no smoke. Locals call it the searing flame. Many curious people have tried to approach the searing flame, but there is a terrifying truth. This flame is not hot, but bone-chillingly cold. In 1978, a paranormal investigator named Elias Vance spent an entire night studying the searing flame. Elias managed to approach the flame and touch it with his gloved hand. Immediately, Elias felt an icy electric shock run through his body. He pulled his hand back, and his skin instantly turned pale white, afflicted with a severe, frozen burn. But worse was what followed. As Elias retreated, he began hearing sounds. Not the wind, but muffled screams emanating from deep inside his head. The screams sounded like people trapped in a confined space, simultaneously being burned and suffocated. The souls consumed by the 1910 accident were trapped. They died in unimaginable agony, and that agony transformed into the searing flame, a kind of unholy negative heat. The flame is not a remnant of the fire. It is the gateway for the trapped souls to seek the warmth they lost. Anyone who touches the searing flame has their body heat and vitality drained by the souls of the victims. This doesn't kill them immediately, but it freezes them from the inside out. Elias Vance was found days later, emaciated, with an unexplainably low body temperature, and he never stopped shivering. Elias received treatment, but he never fully recovered. He was perpetually haunted by the screams in his head and could not tolerate any heat source. He claimed, "The flame didn't want my life. It wanted the feeling of warmth I brought. It is an entity starved for warmth, eternally trapped in icy incineration." The most terrifying curse of the death tracks is this: the searing flame is not a sign of a single trapped ghost. It is a beacon for a group of souls seeking new victims to siphon warmth from. If you wander onto the death tracks at night and see the eternal flame, never approach it, because that flame will not burn your flesh, but it will freeze your soul, forcing you to live the rest of your life in an unrelenting cold, haunted by the ceaseless cries for help from those who were turned into walking ice pillars by the searing flame. Story 3. The Farm That Feeds on Truth. We travel to Iowa, the land of sprawling cornfields and buried family secrets. This is the story of Old Man Tiber's farm, a cursed property where bumper harvests are bought with human truth and pain. Old Man Tiber was an eccentric farmer who lived in the early 20th century. He was obsessed with the dishonesty of humanity. Tiber believed that all the world's troubles, from small conflicts to personal tragedies, originated from lies. He dedicated his life to searching for pure truth. In 1935, Tiber took his own life on his land. But his death was not an end. It was a transformation. According to local lore, Tiber performed an ancient ritual, mixing his own blood and the bones of sick animals into the soil, creating a curse. His soul would not pass on, but would fuse with the very land of the farm. Since then, the Tiber farm became a grotesque place. The harvests here were always abundant, regardless of harsh weather. The corn and wheat grew twice as tall as neighboring farms, yet they were misshapen, the colors bleak, and they carried a faint, putrid scent. The most terrifying thing is the curse Tiber left behind. The land is starved for truth. Anyone who steps onto the boundary of Tiber's farm is compelled by an invisible force to reveal the darkest secret, the most significant lie of their life. If they lie, the ground immediately begins to shake. A deep fissure opens beneath their feet, and they are swallowed whole by the earth. They become part of the fertilizer for the cursed harvest. If they tell the truth, they are allowed to leave, but their soul is permanently weakened. The land draws away the energy of the pain and remorse associated with that confession, leaving them empty, unable to find joy or peace for the rest of their lives. In the 1980s, a real estate investor named George tried to buy the Tiber farm. George was a pragmatic man who did not believe in ghosts. He drove onto the property, determined to finalize the contract. As George reached the middle of the cornfield, he felt a terrible pressure weighing on his chest. He began to sweat cold, and a voice, not human, but a whisper from the soil itself, echoed in his mind. "Speak your truth. What sin has defiled you?" George, in a panic, tried to lie. "I have no secrets. I am a good man." Immediately, the ground beneath George began to violently shake. A wide fissure opened, revealing a dark abyss below. In that moment of terror, George saw faces of those who had been swallowed, desperately trying to pull him down. In sheer terror, George screamed the truth. He had forged documents to ruin a business rival and steal a poor family's assets. As soon as the confession was uttered, the fissure closed. George collapsed, gasping for breath. He was allowed to leave. But George was never the same. He lost all emotion, all passion. He confessed that when he spoke the truth, he felt as if something had been ripped from his chest. The land had taken not only his remorse, but also his ability to feel it. Tiber's farm does not kill with violence. It kills with psychological brutality, turning sinful souls into empty husks. The land is used by old man Tiber to feed on truth and the pain of confessions, yielding an eternal, cursed harvest of souls. And most terrifyingly, when you look at the tall, misshapen corn stalks of Tiber's farm, you can see them seemingly whispering, not with leaves, but with imprisoned stories, the darkest secrets of countless souls the soil has consumed. Story 4. The Call from the Hollow. Control Tower. We head deep into the desolate and secretive lands of Nevada, home not just to the desert, but to countless forgotten military bases. This is the story of Airport G-47, a secret Cold War facility where a strange and inexplicable plane incident once occurred. In 1965, a small civilian plane vanished from the radar screen right over the G-47 runway as it was attempting an emergency landing in thick fog. The plane was never found. Authorities concluded the incident was due to the fog and a technical error. However, there is one chilling detail. The plane disappeared the moment it received its final landing clearance from the air traffic control tower of Airport G-47. That control tower, a tall concrete structure, is now empty and abandoned, but it is rumored to still be operating in a ghostly manner. The legend says that the soul of the air traffic controller who issued the final command to the vanishing plane became trapped in the tower. He is no ordinary ghost. He is a voice controller, an entity created from regret and the eternal repetition of technical procedures. On the darkest nights, when there is no moon and the desert wind stops blowing, if you stand near the base of the tower, you will hear a voice echoing from the void above. It is a technical, emotionless voice, repeating commands unrelated to any actual aircraft. Runway 27 is clear. Maintain your speed. Confirm altitude. You are cleared to land. These commands, broadcast without any radio equipment, are a wicked hypnotic tool. Anyone who listens to the voice long enough will have a false belief imposed upon their soul. They are piloting a plane. They become caught in the illusion of the vanished aircraft. A group of paranormal investigators infiltrated Airport G-47 in 1995. They managed to record the audio of the call from the control tower. When they played back the recording, one member of the team, named David, suddenly changed his demeanor. David got into his truck, fastened his seatbelt, and began driving wildly down the abandoned runway, even though he had never learned to fly a plane. David continuously mumbled, "I hear them. I'm landing. Tower, I need guidance." David's friends tried to stop him. They saw his face was blank, his eyes staring straight ahead, as if he truly saw the cockpit controls of an aircraft. And when the call from the control tower rang out most clearly, "Pilot, you are cleared to land. Reduce altitude. Maintain speed." David accelerated his truck to maximum speed. The terrifying truth is that the entity in the control tower didn't want David to die normally. It wanted David to reenact the crash. The entity in the tower does not guide. It guides the victim to an imaginary collision. David crashed his truck into an old concrete bunker, believing he was executing a perfect landing. He died instantly. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the recorder still operating. On the tape, there were the screams of David's friends, the sound of the truck engine accelerating, and finally, a terrible clash of metal. But after the collision, the voice from the control tower rang out clearly and calmly. "Flight concluded. Welcome to your landing. Switching to dead frequency." The call from the control tower is not regret. It is a ghostly entity that transformed the controller's remorse into a tool. It turns the hypnotized victims into phantom planes that never land safely. And now, every time the call from the control tower rings out, it doesn't just call one person. It is calling many, ensuring that Airport G-47 always has traffic, so that the ghosts of the vanished planes never feel alone. Story 5. The Self-Destructing Portrait. We arrive in Boston, a city rich with history and ancient, somber museums, where cold stone walls can imprison secrets older than time itself. This is the story of a cursed work of art, a portrait whose very existence meant the destruction of its owner. At the old Boston Museum of Art, there is a painting that was stored in the archives for decades. The painting is known as the Mourning Maiden. It is a portrait of a young woman with a melancholic beauty, her eyes conveying deep sorrow, and the corners of her mouth perpetually turned down as if about to cry. The painting was forbidden from display and sealed because of a curse. It was painted by an anonymous artist in the late 19th century who took his own life immediately after completing the work. It is rumored that the artist mixed his own blood and tears into the paint to achieve the somber tone and authentic emotion of the portrait. However, the truth is far more terrifying than the rumors. The portrait is not merely haunted. It is a joy siphon. Anyone who possesses or is in close contact with the portrait for an extended period will be overcome by a profound, inexplicable sadness. They will gradually lose their will to live, their joy in life, and ultimately will attempt to self-destruct. The horror lies in this. The more desperate the new owner becomes, the deeper they sink into despair, the more the portrait becomes supernaturally vibrant and radiant. The woman's hands in the painting seem to warm up, and the colors of her dress become brighter. In the 1990s, a wealthy art collector named Elias Thorne persuaded the museum to sell him the portrait. Elias believed it was just a misunderstood masterpiece. Initially, Elias felt powerfully drawn to the painting, but after only a few weeks of hanging it in his study, his mood began to change. Elias became irritable, suffered from insomnia, and always felt a profound emptiness. He started neglecting his work, friends, and family. Elias's housekeeper recounted a chilling detail. Whenever Elias sat before the painting and lamented the meaninglessness of life, they saw the light in the woman's eyes in the painting seem to flicker with satisfaction. By the third month, Elias had completely broken down. He was consumed by a single thought: suicide. He felt it was the only way to end the sadness he couldn't name. A friend attempted to intervene and came to Elias's house. The friend found Elias sitting on the floor, holding a utility knife, staring intently at the portrait. When the friend looked at the painting, he was horrified. The face of the mourning maiden was no longer sorrowful. She was smiling cunningly. The false tears in the painting were completely dry, and she looked healthy, radiant, as if she had just bathed in joy. The friend managed to save Elias, but the painting was damaged. Eventually, Elias did not take his life with the knife, but he used his last ounce of strength to slash the canvas. The moment the canvas was torn, a blast of intensely cold, terrifying air rushed out from the rip. Elias saved himself, but the painting was ruined. After the incident, the painting was stored back in the museum archives. But there is something strange. Although the painting is slashed, the woman's face within the painting remains intact and is still smiling. However, anyone who looks at the damaged portrait is immediately overwhelmed by a terrible sadness, and they can hear a faint whisper from the rip: "Help me. Mend myself. I am hungry." The self-destructing portrait never truly self-destructs. It merely needs a new owner, one willing to sacrifice their peace of mind for the eternal beauty and spectral vibrancy of a work of art born of despair. Story 6. The Curse of the Locked Toy Chest. We traveled to New Jersey, where busy urban areas conceal forgotten structures steeped in tragedy. This is the story of the Rosewood Nursery, a former child care facility that was abruptly closed in the 1960s following a series of inexplicable child disappearances. Police never found the bodies, nor any leads on a kidnapper. The official story was that the families moved away without notice, but no one believed it. Among the items left behind in the nursery, one stands out: a large, old, heavy wooden toy chest secured with a rusty brass padlock. No one remembers why the chest was locked, and the key has been long lost. Ghost hunters and urban explorers who visited Rosewood all reported a strange phenomenon: a faint tapping sound. At night, when everything was completely silent, a light, rhythmic tapping would consistently emanate from inside the locked toy chest. This tapping was unlike a mouse or creaking wood. It followed a strange, almost deliberate rhythm, sounding like someone tapping with a fingernail. Local legend has it that this chest was not a toy container, but the prison for an ancient boogeyman. The one who abducted the Rosewood children was not human. It was this boogeyman who was subsequently locked away by the children's spirits, using the collective power of their damaged innocence. Despite being imprisoned, the boogeyman still possessed the ability to communicate. The tapping was its curse. A group of young friends, including an amateur filmmaker named Leo, came to Rosewood to shoot a documentary. Leo placed a microphone near the chest and recorded the tapping. When they played back the recording, the tapping was clear and terrifying. It wasn't just tapping, it was a sonic code. Leo's team tried to decipher the rhythm and realized it repeated only one message: "Open up. Let me see. I need to play." They decided not to unlock the chest. Instead, they returned the next night, bringing cameras to record the tapping's reaction. But when they arrived, the tapping from the chest had stopped. The silence was eerie. Leo felt relieved, thinking the boogeyman had given up. But just as they were preparing to leave, one of the team members, Mia, suddenly shivered. Mia pointed to the old brick wall of the nursery where she was leaning. Everyone heard it, the same light, rhythmic tapping. But now it was coming from inside the wall. The tapping then moved quickly, echoing from the ceiling, from beneath the floor, and finally it converged on Mia's own body. The boogeyman was no longer confined by the wooden chest. It had moved its imprisonment to another level. By going silent, it forced the curious to seek it out, and then it used the tapping sound to mark its target. The tapping is a spectral curse. By hearing and believing in its existence, you allow it to latch onto you. The boogeyman uses the tapping to break down the wall of the human physical body. The tapping began to resonate from inside Mia's bones, a painful, unrelenting rhythm. Mia screamed, but her screams were drowned out by the pounding, echoing within her chest. It didn't want to kill her instantly. It wanted to possess her. Leo and the others fled in terror, leaving Mia writhing on the floor, clutching her chest. They never saw Mia again. When they reported to the police, the authorities only found signs of a person who had seemingly self-destructed in a fit of madness. And when Leo played back the final recording, he heard the chilling tapping. But intertwined with it, there was a new sound, faint and joyful, like a child's giggle. The boogeyman had gained a new player. And the terrifying thing is, now, if you walk past old, desolate places with thick brick walls, you might hear a light, rhythmic tapping. It's not a structural defect. It is the sound of a newly trapped soul, forced to tap eternally, so the boogeyman can continue its game. Story 7. The artificial garden of the dead. We traveled to South Carolina, the land of mysterious swamps and ancient cemeteries, where moss-draped trees shadow buried secrets. This is the story of Magnolia Cemetery and a strange area where life itself is rejected. Magnolia Cemetery is known for its Gothic beauty and magnificent marble monuments. But in the western corner of the cemetery, there is a small area, fenced off by old iron railings, where no natural flora can grow. The soil there is barren and gray, as if cursed. The strange thing is, this area is decorated with countless artificial flowers and plants made of plastic, silk, and metal, placed by loved ones. Even though they are next to lush cypress trees and Spanish moss, not a single living blade of grass dares to take root here. It is rumored that this area was cursed by a greedy undertaker named Silas Crouch in the early 20th century. Silas was responsible for the care and decoration of this burial ground. However, his greed led to his downfall. Silas was caught stealing jewelry from bodies before burial. When brought to trial and convicted, Silas uttered a terrible curse aimed at the cemetery. "Even the weeds shall despise this place. Nothing living shall take root, and the dead shall be wrapped only in falseness." After Silas died, his soul was neither burned nor imprisoned. His spirit was transformed into a spectral entity called the Life Rejector. This entity haunts the area where he robbed the dead. It possesses a negative power. It drains all vitality and life energy from the soil, causing any seed or seedling planted there to wither instantly. Its goal is to turn this area into an absolute burial ground, untouched by nature or life. In the 1990s, a team of biologists attempted an experiment. They brought nutrient-rich soil and seeds, trying to revive the area. But after just one night, all the seeds turned into dry dust, and the soil became chillingly cold, as if all heat and moisture had been sucked out. Another witness, a cemetery guard named Hector, recounted the most chilling detail. He noticed that at night, when the moonlight shone down, the plastic and silk flowers in the cursed area seemed to come to life in a ghostly way. They didn't move fast. They would only slowly turn their petals, like eyes staring at those who dared to walk by. Hector swore he saw a deep red silk rose slowly orient itself toward him, as if trying to eavesdrop. One night, Hector approached an old plastic Christmas tree. He heard a faint clicking sound from within. He discovered that the tiny plastic needles on the tree were vibrating, and he heard a chilling whisper emanating from the plastic foliage. "Go away. Bring no life here. We are enough." Silas Crouch's entity made his curse a reality. He didn't just kill plants, he breathed unholy life into the artificial objects, turning them into representations of deceit and death. Those fake flowers and plastic leaves are not mere decorations. They are the eyes of the Life Rejector. They observe everything, silently praying for the demise of those who bring life to the area. And the most terrifying thing is that when you stand in the middle of the artificial garden of the dead, you feel a profound loneliness. You realize that surrounding you is not the peace of the graveyard, but a hostile rejection of nature, where trapped souls are cloaked in falseness, forever unable to find true peace or beauty, and forced to be the spying instruments of a dead man's greed. Story 8. The Phantom Plane and the Red Snow Airport. We traveled to Alaska, the land of perpetual ice and long, frigid nights. Here there is a remote, sealed-off military base, abandoned and forgotten, where the cold comes not just from nature, but from a spectral entity. This is the story of a Cold War tragedy and the red snow. In the 1950s, this base was the site of a secret weapons test. A new chemical agent, designed to cause neurological disarray in the enemy, was accidentally released. The chemical mixed with the snow, coating the entire area in a terrifying layer of blood-red snow, earning it the nickname Red Snow Airport. However, the soldiers stationed there did not die from the chemicals, but from another horror. After the chemical accident, a large transport plane, the one involved in the test, was left on the runway. The plane was severely damaged and completely unmanned. Yet, at night, unbelievable sightings began. The Phantom plane would take off and land in a recurring cycle, making no engine sound whatsoever. This is the reflection plane. The remaining soldiers at the base believed it was the ghost of the pilot, but the truth was far more horrifying. The plane did not have a pilot ghost. It was a physical reflection of the trapped souls. The red chemical agent did not kill the body. It blurred the line between the physical and the immaterial. The souls of the soldiers, trapped by horror and isolation, were reflected onto the plane, turning it into a soul-harvesting tool. The most terrifying thing about the reflection plane is how it hunts. On the darkest nights, when the Phantom plane lands on the red snow runway, it makes no sound, but it casts a distinct shadow under the dim moonlight. This shadow is not just the absence of light. It is a field of spectral energy. Any soldier covered by the shadow of this Phantom plane has their soul sucked out of their body immediately. The process is not painful, but a cold emptiness, as if all emotion and memory are drained away. In 1970, an investigation team was sent to clean up the base. One of them, an officer named Captain Ben Carter, documented his observations in a journal. Carter wrote about seeing his comrade, Sergeant Ramirez, standing and staring at the plane. Then, the plane silently took off, and its shadow swept over Ramirez. Carter recounted. Ramirez was still standing there, but his eyes were completely blank, lifeless, like a walking ice statue. Carter later found the Phantom plane when it landed again. He mustered all his courage, shining his flashlight directly into the empty cockpit. He saw nothing but the stained glass, yet he swore he saw faint reflections on the glass. The faces of Ramirez and the other soldiers, all silently weeping. Their souls were permanently imprisoned in the cockpit of the plane, forced to pilot the Phantom aircraft on an endless journey so it could continue its harvest. Captain Carter eventually escaped the Red Snow Airport, but he carried a terrifying obsession. He could not look at his own shadow without feeling a deep terror. The reflection plane remains there, and the red snow still covers the runway, a chilling reminder that in Alaska, cold and isolation can turn old machinery into soul-sucking monstrosities. And sometimes, the most terrifying thing is not the ghost, but its shadow. Story 9. The Neighborhood Without Children. We traveled to California, not the glittering beaches, but the quiet, unsettlingly perfect suburbs. This is the story of the Cedarwood neighborhood, a place where everything is immaculate. Pretty houses, green lawns, blooming roses, but which lacks one fundamental thing: children. The Cedarwood neighborhood is home to young families, yet no children under 18 are seen playing in the streets. No laughter, no sound of bicycles. All the children in the neighborhood, over 30 of them, mysteriously disappeared over the course of 5 years. Police never found evidence of foul play. The families reported that their children were not abducted. They simply faded away. They didn't run away. They remained in their homes, but were no longer themselves. The terrifying truth is that the neighborhood is controlled by a spectral entity called the Childhood Harvester. This entity doesn't need blood or life. It needs innocence. The Childhood Harvester has turned this neighborhood into its feeding ground. It doesn't kill children. It siphons their childhood and innocence, pushing them into a state of animated lifelessness. A private investigator named Vivian Cole was hired to look into the case. Vivian arrived in Cedarwood and immediately felt the silence was unnatural. Everyone was polite, smiling, but their eyes were vacant, as if they were performing a perfect play. Vivian secretly infiltrated the home of a family whose 2 children were missing. She found them. The 2 children, aged 12 and 14, were sitting in the living room, staring at a blank white wall. They did not react when Vivian called their names. They didn't cry, didn't laugh, and barely blinked. They just sat there, silent. Vivian touched them. Their skin was cold, but they were breathing. When Vivian held an old toy, their favorite, in front of them, something chilling happened. The older child stared at the toy and a faint hiss escaped their throat, like air leaking from an old tire. It was their attempt at laughter, but devoid of joy, only emptiness. Vivian realized that these children were still physically present, but they were just empty husks. The Childhood Harvester had stripped them of their ability to feel joy, curiosity, and vitality. They were imprisoned in their own bodies, forever frozen physically at the threshold of adulthood, but without their childlike souls. Vivian found a secret journal belonging to a mother in the neighborhood. The mother had tried to resist the entity, and she wrote, "It needs silence. It needs false perfection. Laughter, tears, curiosity. That is its food. It drains the childhood to maintain the neighborhood's lovely, perfect facade. The more perfect the neighborhood, the stronger the harvester." Vivian realized the harvester's strategy. It needed absolute perfection and silence to keep the parents in denial. The parents were forced to act out the drama of an ideal life, knowing that if they showed distress, imperfection, or tried to flee, the entity would take their adult souls too. In a final desperate attempt, Vivian tried to create chaos. She turned on an old radio at a maximum volume. Instantly, the silence was shattered. The neighbors rushed out of their houses, their faces contorted in horror. And then, the harvester appeared. It had no concrete form, only a vortex of cold, gray air, swirling intensely between the manicured lawns. The vortex did not attack Vivian. It surged towards the house where the 2 lifeless children were. The vortex entered the house, and Vivian heard a sharp, cold wail, like a vacuum sucking the air from a glass jar. Vivian escaped, but she knew the harvester had punished that family for their imperfection. She carried one terrifying realization with her. After she left Cedarwood, no one spoke of the children anymore. The neighborhood became quieter, more perfect. The neighbors claimed they couldn't remember ever having children. The childhood harvester had successfully erased the memory of childhood and innocence, transforming the Cedarwood neighborhood into a perfect spiritual prison, where adult suffering is hidden beneath a coat of perfection, and the children are forever trapped in a state of soulless emptiness. Story 10. The Bell of the Betrayer. We conclude our journey in Salem, Massachusetts, the town forever associated with the witch trials and a dark history of suspicion and betrayal. In the heart of Salem stands an old abandoned church, and atop its steeple is a large cracked brass bell. This bell is known as the Bell of the Betrayer. Local legend tells that this bell was cast in the late 17th century, immediately following the witch trials. The metal used to cast the bell was not ordinary. It was mixed with material from an old torture device and a set of shackles used to imprison the accused women. The bell is tied to the soul of a woman named Abigail. Abigail was a close friend of one of the victims who was burned. To save her own life, Abigail testified against her friend, swearing she saw her performing demonic rituals. Due to her betrayal, Abigail was freed, but the torment and guilt never left her. When she died, it is said her soul could not pass on. It was drawn into the bell, which was made of the very material of persecution. Annually, on Halloween night, the cracked bell automatically vibrates, emitting a high-pitched, terrifying sound. Not a chime, but a screaming wail of metal. This sound is not just the bell, it is the wail of betrayal. Anyone who hears the bell on that night has their soul targeted by a spectral entity tied to the bell. This entity does not need to kill people. It needs absolute torment. The affected victims are forced to relive the worst betrayal of their lives. A lie, a selfish act, a broken promise. The remorse and guilt become so vivid and real that they are unbearable. In 2005, a local historian named David Hayes decided to record the wail of betrayal. David was a man with a clean past and believed he had nothing to regret. He was convinced he would be safe. David ascended the bell tower on Halloween night, equipped with professional recording gear. When the bell began to vibrate, David felt a massive headache, and then he found himself standing in a hallucinatory scene. In the vision, David saw himself as a young man. He had betrayed a promise to his deceased mother to take care of his younger sister. Out of selfishness and life pressure, he abandoned his sister, leaving her destitute and ill. This torment was not a memory, but a resurrection of pain. David found himself repeating the cruel words he had spoken to his sister years ago, feeling her pain as his own. David screamed in the bell tower. He could not endure the self-inflicted guilt. The bell was siphoning his remorse, turning it into energy for its ghostly vibrations. When the police found David, he had severely injured himself in a frenzy, trying to tear the guilt out of his body. He was alive, but he incessantly mumbled, "I betrayed her. The bell did not forgive me." And the terrifying thing is, David, like Abigail, could not find peace. His soul was not trapped in the bell, but was turned into a new amplifier. Anyone who spoke to David felt a deep sense of pain and remorse, not David's, but their own guilt about past sins and betrayals. The bell of the betrayer does not just ring, it calls forth unconfessed sins. It uses the remorse and torment of its victims to amplify its power, creating a wave of spiritual agony that spreads throughout Salem. And on the following Halloween night, Salem residents swore that the wail of betrayal was stronger than before, resonating further. They realized that the bell now contained not just Abigail's soul, but the torment of countless victims, all ringing together in a deadly symphony of sin and unforgiven betrayal.